everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Rebecca and Rebecca, where we love books. And today is one of our favorite days. As you know, we love talking to the authors, and today we get to talk to the lovely and talented Sarah Sundin and her book, Midnight on the Scottish Shore. So, yes, there's the cover. It's gorgeous as well. And Rebecca's gonna kind of get us started with the bio so we can get to know Sarah a little bit, and then we will kind of go about our business and have a chat, right? That's what we like to do.
And
So,
do this and say who you are. That's Rebecca Reed.
oh, sorry, I'm Rebecca Reed. Yes, from Indiana, where it's sunny today and it's very nice outside.
Yeah.
So,
And I'm Rebecca Yager from Dallas, Texas, where it is also sunny and the temperatures are already going up way too soon here. I'm not ready for summer.
And I'm in California where it's actually raining. So everything's flipped.
We have
yeah,
flipped. Well,
we're
Sarah,
all
let me just give folks a little short bio introduction about you, and then we're going to dive in and talk about your writing process at midnight on the Scottish shore and other fun things. So, um, I love this part. Family tales drew Sarah to the World War II era. Her grandfather, Frederick Stewart, served as a pharmacist mate, a medic in the U.S. Navy, and her great uncle, Roderick Stewart, flew a B-17 Flying Fortress in Australia and England and flew into Pearl Harbor during the attack. I mean, that is amazing. So, Sarah's novels, if you haven't read them, explore the drama, daring, and romance of the World War II era. Her latest novel, which we'll talk about today, is Midnight on the Scottish Shore, and it's already received a starred review from the Library Journal. Her best-selling Embers in the London Sky received starred reviews from Booklist and the Library Journal. Sound of Light was a finalist for both the Christie Award and the Carroll Award. Until the Leaves Fall in Paris received the 2022 Christie Award. Are we embarrassing you? Yes.
I clean that up.
With all these wonderful awards. All right, the sky above us won the 2020 Carroll Award, which is over her shoulder there. When Sarah isn't writing, her husband and her enjoy traveling and taking their two rescue dogs for lengthy walks. She teaches Sunday school and women's Bible studies and speaks to community church and writers groups. And she also serves, if she's not busy enough, y'all, she's a program director for the West Coast Christian Writers Conference. And so visit her at sarahsundin.com, but we'll mention her website again as we go. So welcome, Sarah. And again, thank you for being
Thank
here
you for
today.
having me.
So,
we're really excited to well, I was really excited to read this book. I have to confess that I hadn't read very many of your books up until this point because I don't like World War II. It's not my thing, but um, I loved this story for
yeah.
lots of reasons. One is it's in Scotland, and that's my place. But I just loved how you talked about something so unknown, and introduced us to something that is I've never heard of before, didn't even know existed. And so could you tell us a little bit about maybe how you got the idea for this story?
Well, the idea came partly because my husband was nagging me to write a story set in Scotland, and he and I are both part Scottish, and he loves Scotland. He says, "You need to write one in Scotland," and so I've been noodling on it, and I didn't really have an idea. And then I was chatting with my youngest son, who is a mythology buff, and he said, "Well, Mom, if you said something in Scotland, you really should include some of the mythology." And he said, and so I said, "Well, tell me about some of these stories." And so he told me the story of the Selkie, and the Selkie appears as a seal at sea. But when she lands, she removes her sealskin, and she is a beautiful young woman. And any man unfortunate enough to see her falls in love with her. But to keep her on land where she doesn't want to be, he has to hide her sealskin. But if she refines that sealskin, she's going to go right back to sea. So as he's telling me the story, I imagine a woman landing in a rubber raft, her sealskin, and the Scotsman seeing her on the beach. But she's a Nazi spy, and so I had to do a little research and found out that yes, there were German spies who came to England. I already knew that. And I found out they actually did come to Scotland, and they were caught. All of them were caught, but MI5 turned a lot of them become double agents. So that's when I knew I had my story idea. Of course, I couldn't make her a true Nazi, or my readers wouldn't follow along. So then I also, as I've started reading up about the MI5 double agents, and what a strange and varied lot they were. They were quite a bunch of characters. Most of them were pretty awful sorts. But some of them were Nazis and they refused to turn and they were executed. Um, some of them actually joined the German Abwehr specifically because they wanted to escape from occupied Europe. So I said, well, there's my idea. So I decided that Cilla was in the Dutch resistance and she gets herself in trouble. But how she's helping the resistance is that she has infiltrated the Dutch Nazi Party because her sister's in the Dutch Nazi Party. And so she has an in. And then she's feeding information to her friends with the resistance newspaper. But she's worried that eventually she's going to slip and say the wrong thing and she's going to end up killed. So she wants to get out. So she finds out the Opfair is recruiting spies, and she says, "There's my ticket to England," which it was, but she wasn't counting on being captured immediately upon landing by our kilt-wearing Scotsman. So
Yes.
that's where it came from.
That's lovely. I love mythology, so I knew the Selkie story already, and it really added to my enjoyment of the story because you included that in there. You worked it in so well. It was all very, it kept kind of coming back, and you kept using it. I love that. I thought it was a really fantastic addition. Made the story unique.
It was fun.
It was good. Well, let's talk a little more about your writing process. And to me, one thing that struck me is that you didn't necessarily want to be a writer from childhood, you said. I mean, you're only talking 20, 25 years ago, perhaps, that.
Yeah, 5 years actually. This in January, it was 25 years since I started writing. That was not my plan. I majored in chemistry in college. I love science. I became a pharmacist. Great career for a woman. I was able to work part-time when my kids were little, and the plan was to work full-time as they got older. And I had a great plan for my life. And God had other plans because he has a great sense of humor, doesn't he? And his plan was for me to write novels. And we had long conversations at the beginning where I said, Lord, have you forgotten that I'm a pharmacist, that I already have a job and a career that I love and I'm kind of good at and pays really well? He was like, I kind of know that about you. And this is what we're doing now. And so he gave me this story idea. I woke up from a dream with it, and they would not leave me alone, and I had to write it. It's never happened to me since, but it was close to obsession, where the story was just like that. It just took me over, and I had to write it. I've never felt that compelled to write a story before. It was God's way of basically shanghaiing me into this writing adventure because unlike most of your guests probably say, I knew I wanted to be a writer since I was a little girl. I was born with a pen in my hand, and this has always been a dream. And that's how most writers. There are a few people I've met who have similar stories to mine, but and I always loved stories. I was a reader. I loved to tell. I've always a storyteller. My mom was always telling me to stop exaggerating and making things up because that's kind of what I did. Now I get paid to do it.
How lovely.
Yes.
But yeah, I put it in the same category as being a ballerina or an Olympic ice skater. It's just like, I knew how rare it was for people to get published. So like, well, I'll do something practical, like become a pharmacist. So, which I love too. So yeah,
I think that's how most of us who want to be writers always went into the practical career,
Yes. Which is good because it does pay. In writing, doesn't.
Unfortunately, no, not at all.
Yeah, yeah.
What Stephen King, J.K. Rowling, only
Yeah,
Nora
yeah,
Roberts.
they're the exceptions, not the rule.
Exactly, exactly. So, because of your family history, and you talked in your bio about your relatives that were part of World War II, so everything still is geared towards World War II. It's where
Yeah,
you planted it, and but the family
yeah.
history had to help inspire some of.
That's what started it. Partly, actually, the one I had, the story that came to me in a dream was a contemporary, and then the next novel I wrote was a contemporary. And then I had another story idea, and I knew it had to be historical. And I thought to myself, well, I'll just do World War II because it wasn't that long ago. And I got an A in high school history, so how hard could this be? And my grandparents told stories. And so I went in completely naive, and it's good because if I'd known how much research I had to do, I wouldn't have started. But once I started the research, I loved it. And then, the story would raise a question, and I would research it, and the research would answer more questions, and it cycled on each other. And now I'm at the point right now where I absolutely love historical fiction. I'm World War II fascinates me. I'm very glad that it's popular right now, so I don't have to think of another area to write in. I'm kind of branded as World War. I am branded as World War II. If I had to switch, it would be hard to find a different era and then um, start researching that from scratch because I
Mm.
know where to find my stuff for World War II. I know how to research that era. So to start all over would be very tiring.
Yeah.
So, and the market shifts, and someday World War II may be passé, and I might have to rethink things. But right now, I'm hoping I could ride this train a little longer.
Well, I think, too, as long as, you know, whether it's the in thing or not, as unique as your stories are and the things that you talk about, yeah, they're World War II, but they're not the typical, like, okay, we're in the trenches and we're in Germany or we're in France, or even Italy's kind of gotten pretty popular in the recent past. But, I mean, if you can keep finding these types of stories like this, where you're still in World War II, but it's such a different type of story, and it's a different piece of the war that people just don't know existed, probably, or don't know very much about, at least. I mean, I would say it's not going to matter whether it's popular or not. I think you're still going to be able to, write those kinds of stories. 'Cause people want good stories, first and foremost, and you write good stories. So,
Yeah, it's interesting because when I first started writing, World War II was not popular, so I could kind of write whatever I wanted because there weren't a lot of stories out there. But now it's hugely popular, so I have to be very careful to find stories that are fresh,
mhm.
ideas that just coming at it from a slightly different angle. And so it's not like every other story out there. So,
Yeah, well, you're doing a good job.
I think you succeeded. One of your early series was about the B-17s, the flying fortresses, as I recall. I
yeah,
think that's
that
one
was
of
my
the
first
first
one.
series I
That
read
was my first. Yeah.
of your, okay. I was on
Yeah.
I was on it then, but I found that so fascinating. Well, I'm a daughter of a pilot, but he did not fly
Oh, yeah.
B-17s, but still just flying,
Oh,
to
yeah.
do that. But to have the research, to have that within your family, and then to be able to
Yeah.
write.
It was fun. And my great uncle, who was the pilot, he was a character. Oh my goodness, he was a character. And he could just charm a room. If you looked at him, you think he wasn't that good looking of a man. The women adored him. There was just something, a little bit of a little lost boy about him, and women just flocked to him. And he has very charming personality, but the sweetest man. But oh yeah, but he was a storyteller, and he had some um, harrowing stories, funny stories. Those two brothers, my grandfather was the same way. They were both storytellers, both of these brothers, and they had a way of finding the humor in very difficult situations. My grandfather was serving in a naval hospital on Guam, and they had these survivors from Iwo Jima and Okinawa, and horrible stuff, horrible stuff. And he was on the psych ward, so he was seeing, men who are catatonic with what we now call PTSD, catatonic, where they just couldn't speak, couldn't move, and then they'd wake up screaming. And so he saw the worst of it, and he found humor. That's just the sort of men these guys were. They came from a very hard background through depression, and but they were just the sort of men who, like, let's find something positive. But they weren't, sugarcoating it. They would also tell the harrowing stories, like I said. That I
Yeah.
heard those stories. And he told those stories. So and I appreciate that. So I think that sensibility has seeped into my own storytelling. I try to find humor. I try to find light, because especially as Christians, we will find the light. God will shine it even in the worst situations, but not skirting away from the hard stuff, because life is dirty and messy, war especially so. And I don't want to sugarcoat it, because that's not fair to the readers, or to history. It's not fair to the men and women who lived through this.
Mhm.
Well, speaking of, the dark stuff, I mean, this book has some moments that there's some hard truths that Lachlan especially has to learn about his brother. And we commented on this in the review, how you did the way you brought that secret out was so sensitive. It was so, I mean, to people who would understand what they were talking about, it was very obvious what happened. But it
Yeah.
also protected anybody who might be younger that was more naive without having a traumatic, reveal there that it was like, oh my goodness, that kind of stuff happens. I thought that was just, and you really did a great job of like just holding that back until that very moment of finding out what happened. And I love how you brought Cilla kind of to get Lachlan to understand that there was something that did happen, most likely, or he wouldn't, that it wasn't like Neil to have done that just without any trauma. um
Yeah.
yeah, as we really appreciated that segment of the book and how you wrote that. It was very
Thank
well
you.
done. And um so I just wanted to mention that. I wanted to, because some books, you're kind of like, whoa, and it's in your
Yeah.
face, and it wasn't like that at all. It was very well done. Um,
I think that comes from being a Sunday school teacher, and I've been teaching fourth and fifth Sunday school for fourth and fifth grade Sunday school for 20 years, 20 plus years. And as I form relationships with these kids, and then they become teenagers, and they find I write books, and they want to read the books that teacher Sarah wrote. And so I always have in my mind these 12 and 13-year olds, who are darling, and I want to shield them, while also having them start thinking about, I don't want to, as I said, I don't want to sugarcoat it. I don't want to gloss over the hard things of life, but there are ways to word it so that you don't totally destroy these young people.
Right.
yes.
Yeah.
Right.
And my former pastor, his wife reads my books.
Yeah. Well,
Everybody should read your books. So,
Yes,
yes.
I think, okay. My mom reads my books. My mother-in-law passed away, but she used to read my books. And all the ladies at her church, like, I shouldn't write things that will get Diane Sundin in trouble with her church friends. So my
Mm,
family name on my book. So it's like, that in mind.
that's a good way to look at it. I mean, it keeps you making sure that, you know, that sensitivity is there. I really did appreciate it. I also appreciated the Scottish accent that was because I listened to the book, so the audio was phenomenal. I mean, your
Oh, I've
narrator
heard.
did a great job, and it felt so real. Of course, with your ability to describe scenes and set scenes, we already felt like we were there even without the narrator, but the narrator just brought that extra little
Oh, I'm so
sense
glad.
of, Scotland
Yeah.
with her amazing. She did such a great job because there was a lot of different dialects that she had to do, and she did a
Oh gosh.
fantastic job. So
I haven't
I
listened to it yet.
appreciate
I'm not an audiobook reader, but I've heard really good things. So I
it's
probably should open it up.
fantastic. I listen
Yeah.
almost exclusively. I just because I'm always on the go. So it's the only way I
Yeah.
get to read is by listening. And so I have, there are definitely good and better and best when it comes to narrators. And this one was superb. She was
Oh,
excellent.
fantastic. I'm so
Yeah.
glad to hear that. Yeah. And one of my favorite moments was we were actually at the Scapa Flow Museum in Orkney. And I had a very esoteric question about Scapa Flow and the naval base there. And so they brought in this young man. Oh, he couldn't have been older than 30, 35. Of course, I'm getting older. And it's like, he was probably 40, but he
He was
seemed
a
very young to
kid.
me. Yeah, he was. He was a kid, probably about the same age as my kids. And he was just darling. And so he answered my question. And they said, well, hey, would you like to see this other building? It isn't open to the public yet, but we're going to be opening it up soon. Would you like to see it? Like, yeah. And so he took my husband and I over there, and he was describing all of these boats and equipment that they had in that room. And none of it was pertinent to my story. I didn't care because he was talking in that Scottish brogue the whole time, and I'm just soaking up. I just kept asking questions like, you just keep talking, honey. You keep talking. Then my favorite moment, and it took me a moment to understand what he was saying. He said, I'm so sorry. We're very, and I'm paraphrasing, he says, I'm very sorry. We're short staffed today because it's lambing season. All the sheep were giving birth. It's lambing season.
Oh,
So everybody in the Orkney is out taking care of their sheep. So they were short staffed. I'm like, this is the best. I mean, where else do you go to a museum where like, we're short staffed because we're out taking care of our sheep? Like, this is the best.
Yeah. Oh,
I
wow.
love that. But that so to be there and to be at Scapa Flow so that's why there's such a good sense. You walk the steps that you put your characters.
I
Yeah.
sailed. The only way to get to Linus, where the naval base was, is by ferry. So if we stayed in Caithness. We stayed in the town of Thurso, which is charming. I never heard of it before I started reading this book. And Thurso is this charming town, and it's a ferry base. And so to get to Orkney, you take the ferry. You can fly there, but most people take the ferry to Orkney, and that takes you into Stromness. And then there's a ferry that goes across Scapa Flow to the island of Hawaii to Linus. And of course, I have to do this. And that's where the museum was. It was on at Linus, so at the former naval base. So we took this ferry, and it's cold, it's kind of misty, it's overcast, and I'm on the top deck taking spins down. He's got me too when we get across, and I'm taking videos and photos. I'm just breathing it all in. I just wanted to experience. I am sailing across Scapa Flow just like Lachlan did. It was
Wow.
great.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah,
That's
no,
definitely the kind of research I would like.
Oh yeah, that's the fun research.
Yeah,
I was
that's
about
the
to
fun
say
stuff.
you had more fun than probably writing the book was just
Yeah.
doing the
And
research.
it's so cute because my husband he does not read my books. He did read one. This is sort of man. He says he was reading one of my books once, and I said, "What are you doing?" And he was on his Kindle. I said, "What are you reading?" And he mentioned my book. I was like, "What do you mean? Why are you reading it? I have all these books on the shelf. You've never read them." He says, "Well, it was free on Kindle." Like, you're literally married to the author. You have all the books on the shelf. They're free all the time. He says, "Well, this was free." It's like, okay then, honey.
I love
Sure.
So that's who I'm married to. But anyway, he's just not he's into history, but not into the lovey-dovey stuff.
Mm.
So we were doing some research in Normandy for my Sunrise in Normandy series, and it's raining, and we are tramping through the mud, going down into a German bunker, and he's loving it. He's having the greatest time. And I said, honey, aren't you really glad that I don't write stories set in prissy English tea rooms? And he turned around and gave me this look of horror.
Oh,
That's it, Rebecca. We need to do a whole series on the spouses of writers.
yeah. That could be quite
They have
interesting, I
stories.
feel like. Yeah.
It sounds like your husband has a lot of stories he could
Oh, I'm
tell.
sure he does. Yeah, Julie Klassen just did a really cute blog post, which her husband took over and wrote, and it was just
I think
darling.
I saw that. Yeah.
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 just darling.
Oh, that's so good. Well, that's why the realism again of your books are there because of the research. But it's a lot more than going to the museums or doing the. I mean, you've got to. So you're obviously an outliner. You can't just sit there and be a pantser.
I tried. I'm not a pantser. I work by outlining, and I think that's so key to writers. And so many writers, writing teachers will tell you there's only one way to do it, and that you need to be, let the spirit take you where it takes you, and follow the magical, sparkly rainbow of pantsing. Um, and other writers like, oh, you have to outline, and if you're not outlining, you're not going to get a good story. And like, no, that's not true. You have to do how your brain is wired. My brain is wired to work best by outlines. That's how my personality is. I'm once again, I'm a scientist. I like things in order. I like to have everything laid out neatly in front of me. Um, and there are others who an outline kills their creativity. Then do not outline.
Mhm.
For me, an outline releases my creativity. I know where I'm going, and now I can enjoy the ride. So, but yeah, I have a rather lengthy outlining process. When I tell other outliners what I do, they kind of give me this look like, huh? And then they tell me what they do, and I go, huh? We each have our own processes. So mine works for me, and I've tried to combine steps, and I've tried to skip steps, and I always end up going back. And
Hmm.
my little process works for me.
Well, and I think that's great advice for new writers, especially starting out. You
Mhm.
really do have to find your own
You have to
process
find it.
Yeah.
and
And
stuff.
that means, honestly, the first novel I wrote was pantsed. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know that you could outline a book. I thought you had to just write and see where it took you. And every interview I'd ever read with an author, that's how they described their writing process. So that's what I did. And it was a horrible mess. 750 pages, simple contemporary romance. That's what pantsing did for me.
Mm.
And it was
Hmm.
horrible. I was able to edit it down, but that was a horrible process. But then when Lorraine Snelling was teaching, and she's an outliner, and she was talking about what she did, and the light bulb was going on. Like, well, yes, of course, that's the kind of person I am. When I wrote reports for school, I had my little outline and I filled it in, and it worked great. And I realized, well, that's just who I am as a person. And I tried outlining, and the next novel came together so neatly. And like, okay, I just embraced that.
I think you're right. That's great. And everybody, you can try all the different methods, and you're going to end up. I feel like there's no two writers who have the exact same
Mm.
process. We
Mhm.
might use some parts of the same things, and we might even call it the same thing, but the actual way we do it is not going to be the same because we're different people and we think differently. As you said, you have to go to your strengths, whatever it is that you're good at, whatever, however it makes you feel comfortable. I think that's great. And you can change, like,
Yeah.
you don't have to start out one way and stay that way. You can adapt as you go and kind of fill those gaps in with whatever, as you learn different methods and talk to different people. So I think that's part of the process. I think it's why too, like, it takes some of us, me especially, it takes us a while to really like develop that method that works. And then,
Mhm.
once you get it, then it's just a process of refining it until it's the way you really want it. And then you can just kind of use it and go to town. But
And
yeah,
it's funny because it, um, I can't tell you how many times I'm just staring at a mess in my story and going, what can I do? And I try something different. I have, it was the funniest thing. I was walking through the neighborhood with my dog, and people leave things out and put free on it.
Mhm.
There were two whiteboards, and they're enormous. They're like, oh, I can't show you with my hands because it's out of the screen. Oh, 6 feet by 4 feet. They're the big whiteboards, free. And they were still in their wrapping. I'm like, okay, get the dog home, get the SUV, pick those up now. Like, why has no one else taken these? This is the best thing ever. And I am very visual. So I've been using those a lot for plotting now because
mm,
I just get out all my colored pens, and I can't figure this scene out. I can't figure out this section. And I start drawing with different colors and arrows, and I don't like it there, or erase it, move it over there.
Mhm.
And so that's just something I've been playing with lately. And it does seem to really help me when I'm getting into conundrums. I'm editing a section of the first act of my next book where my agent said the first act is too long and too slow, and I said, I it is, isn't it? And so she said, these are the problems that I see, that this plot line starts too late and the romance starts too late. Like, okay, and I'm looking at all these scenes that have to take place. How do I move this
Mhm.
while keeping all the pieces that they need to line up in a certain order? And I've just was scribbling on little scraps of pink for her and blue for him, and I'm rearranging them. Like, wait, but that's three scenes in a row with her. I need to get him in there. And like, oh, wait, but that happens in there. I need to get that before. And it was just so, but yeah, I've been playing with little scraps of paper with this
Mhm.
one. And so, each I just try different things, and
Mhm.
yeah.
And see
Yeah.
what gels. But yeah, everyone thinks writing's so glamorous, right? The glamorous side of writing.
Yeah,
There
we're
you go.
playing with paper and pens and trying to, yeah, it's
So
messier
stressful.
than it looks from the
It
from the
sure is.
finished product.
It is.
No, it's
Well,
called plotting a knockdown, smackdown wrestling match where I'm just like, history and character and plot.
Yeah.
Once I get that done, like the it's like, this is fun. I get to play, but the plotting, it's hard.
wrestle it
Yeah.
in submission. I think one thing, and
Yeah.
you kind of touched on this when you were talking about your hero and heroine and the pink and the blue paper. But what we liked about Cilla and Lachlan was, you can't have them just fall in love because they were enemies or so,
Enemies,
Lachlan
literally
thought. So
enemies.
the way I think we really liked the slow burn of it, and I don't know how to describe it, but how they slowly came to appreciate each other and then fell in love. It wasn't this instant, you know, falling in love, which wouldn't have, made sense for the story and for that time period and for who they were. So there had to be a little wrestling with how quick do you get them together or get them falling for each other.
Oh
Um,
yeah. And honestly, because I'm in love with my characters, I want them to fall in love with each other very early. Like, but in this case, like, no, he thinks she's a Nazi spy. He does not trust her with good reason. Yeah,
Yeah.
she landed as a Nazi spy with a Nazi radio.
mhm.
She Why would she not be a Nazi spy? She says she isn't. Of course, every Nazi spy is going to say they're not a Nazi spy. So he does not trust her at all. And for him, if he'd fallen in love with her early, that would have been in violation of his character, of who he is.
Mhm.
So he had to take a long time to first trust her professionally, and then to like her as a person, and then finally to love her. So he had to go through that step, and he was going to wrestle with it every way. She had less of, because she's already on the Allied side, she
Mhm.
has less of a thing, but he wanted her dead. And that's not something you can just brush off like, oh, but he's got beautiful eyes. Oh, he turned you in to be executed. You're going to hold a grudge for a little while.
Yeah.
So, and she thinks he's a fuddy duddy, and he is a fuddy duddy, and so she has to come to appreciate
Mhm.
him, who he is. He's not the kind of man she's always been drawn to, and she has to come to appreciate this sort of man.
Yeah.
Well, it seemed too that, she didn't even know who she was. That was part of it too, right? She had to kind of figure out who she really was because she had an idea of who she thought she was, but then of course, we think we know ourselves, and then we find out that we're really not quite as accurate of a judge as we are or ought to be, maybe. And so I think, that made sense too, that she didn't know herself, so her initial thoughts of him being so straight-laced and stubborn and no fun were based on who she thought she had to be the life of the party. She was the party girl. She was, not the serious person. But then once she figured out who she was, then it was like she could start appreciating his qualities. But then they still had the whole, like, you're not allowed. And that held them apart too. Once they
Yeah.
decided to like each other, then it was still like you had that barrier to overcome as well.
Yeah. Yeah, so that
Mm.
was a fun one. I think slow burn is my favorite. I think it's um more accurate. I know insta love happens. I've had friends who fell in love with first friend love at first sight and happily married, 40, 50 years later. It does happen, but I think it's more common that we meet somebody and we slowly get to know them. And as we slowly get to know them, we like them and then fall in love. So I
Hmm.
think that's more a more normal experience for most people. So that just tends to happen in my stories more often. I'm trying to remember if I've ever had insta love. I've insta attraction actually, but I'm trying to think
Yeah,
if I've ever had. I don't think I've ever had that. I might have, and somebody can say, "But you did that in such a book." I might have.
maybe.
So
I mean, after you write so many that it starts to
yeah,
kind of get difficult to separate them, I'm sure.
yeah,
Um,
Well,
yeah.
we like that, but I'm curious now. Your when you're working on for next year, I presume is still part of the Vanderzee family. Garrett, he was
yes,
mentioned in this book, right?
yes, he was. He was at the very beginning. He's Scylla's cousin. And Garrett's an engineer. His best friend Bernardus recruits him into working with Organization Todt, which is a German quasi-military group that built fortifications. And the idea being, Bernardus is in the resistance, Garrett used to be, and they want to map out the German defenses so they can sneak them to the Allies. And men really did this. Men did join Organization Todt to send information back to the Allies. So they do that thinking they're going to be stationed in France. And they are rather surprised when they're hustled onto a boat that goes to Jersey in the occupied Channel Islands, the only British soil that was occupied by the Germans in World War II. So now he's in a conundrum because he's wearing a German uniform. He is building for the Germans. And the only reason he's doing it is to get maps off the island. And now he can't because he doesn't get leave for 6 months. How on earth is he going to get the maps off the island? So meanwhile, he meets Dr. Ivy Picot, who is the female physician, and she's caring for patients in bad circumstances, lots of shortages and stuff in Jersey. And meanwhile, she gets asked to help. Organization Todt has brought in all these slave workers, most of them from Ukraine, and horribly, horribly treated as Soviet prisoners of war and partisans, really abused. So a lot of them escaped and were hidden by the locals in Jersey. And there was a ring of, this is true, there was a ring of physicians who cared for these people. So Ivy gets involved with this. So she is caring for escapees from Organization Todt. And then she meets Garrett, who was wearing the Organization Todt uniform. So, and then her little brother, Charlie, is the one who volunteers to help Garrett Bernardus get their maps to St. Malo in France. So their paths are
Okay.
going to cross.
I
Nice.
love this. You find the little stories there, things that we are not necessarily in everyone's
Yeah.
knowledge base and
Yeah,
stuff.
and I've
I
been fascinated by the Channel Islands for years. And then when the Guernsey Literary Society book came out, I was kind of like, oh, well, that topic's been taken. And but there's that's one story. That's one story. And the Channel Islands, there are lots of stories in the Channel Islands, and so that's one of the reasons I chose Jersey instead of Guernsey. I thought I needed to pick a different island, and there are so many stories in Jersey, and actually that's where all the where most of the slave workers were. In
Mm.
Guernsey they had more of volunteer workers with Tote there. So there were some great stories in Jersey, and it was fun to explore that because it's kind of fun being this part of Britain, but it was occupied by the Germans. So that's just, I've always wanted to tell that story. Finally
Oh,
get to
that'll
that
do it.
be
sounds
great.
good. Do you have a title for it yet?
I do, but it's not public
Okay.
yet. So I'll just hold off. I've learned if I publicize the title before the cover comes out,
Mhm.
that people start posting it to Goodreads and stuff like that. And then it's like this nightmare of like, I've got all these fake books floating around that I need to try
Oh,
to merge. And so I've just learned that that needs to wait until the title comes out and it's on the cover and it's on Amazon and it's all one big package there. So
That makes sense.
yes, like it's coming out February 2026.
Then we will look
Okay.
forward to that. But meanwhile, well, speaking of your social media, let's tell folks where they can follow you and find you. So when this cover reveal happens and this title happens for the next one,
Probably in July. Yes.
okay.
Yes, I'm on Facebook, Sarah Sundin author, and Instagram and Threads, same thing, Sarah Sundin author. Easiest way to get the first peek at the cover is to join my email newsletter list, and I send that out about once a month. So I try not to spam you. And you sign up on my website at sarahsundin.com. Pretty easy to find.
Yeah, that's not difficult. But meanwhile, Midnight on the Scottish Shore is out now, and it's a
Yes.
fascinating piece of Scottish history along with the World War II history. And then if you go to Sarah's website, I mean, all her previous series, The Wings of Glory, I think we mentioned Wings of the Nightingale, Waves of Freedom, Sunrise at Normandy. She has some fabulous series out there too. So if you're World War II buff, or if you're just a good book, a good reader, want to read a good book,
Yeah.
check them out. Rebecca, any final notes for Sarah?
Like I said, I really enjoyed all of these pieces because these are the things that I really love. And so it was like, yeah, it was World War II, but that's okay because it has all this other really good stuff in it. And it made me forget that it was kind of World War II. So, I mean, I think people need to understand, readers need to understand that if you have read one book and you didn't like it because of a certain thing, just because another book is in that similar genre or in that niche doesn't mean it's the same book, and you might still enjoy it even though, because that's what I did. I definitely enjoyed this book, and I read the first one of Sunrise in Normandy, and that one was really good too. So I really like that. So yeah, I've definitely become a fan, and we'll be reading more. So I think that's the thing. As a reader, you need to kind of keep an open mind, and sometimes it's more about who you read than what you read.
That's it.
Very true.
We're converting her, Sarah, to World War II books. We're converting her.
Only certain ones.
We'll get there. Well, meanwhile, Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today. We do appreciate your time. Again, the book is Midnight on the Scottish Shore, and Rebecca and I really enjoyed it. And the review is up already, and so,
Yes.
but meanwhile, pick it up, and then we'll look for your book next February. On the
Next
Channel
one.
Islands. So again, sarahsundin.com. So, all right, Rebecca, next month, big
What's next
change
month?
in topic.
Oh, yes. So we're back. We're still doing World War II. We
We're
have
still
been
doing World
stuck
War
in
II,
World
but
War II
different.
for a while now, but it's been quite the different takes on it. So next month we're doing a World War II steampunk matchup. So this is Trisha and Nathan Goyer with Breath of Bones.
Breath of
So
Bones.
this is and it also has some kind of the lore. We were talking about the Selkie folklore. This one also has a Jewish story in it that is kind of one of the impetus for the plot. So a little bit more folklore from a different perspective, a little bit more World War II from a different perspective, little steampunk if you're more into the fantasy or spec fiction. So you'll want to check out this and the review, and then of course the interview next month on Rebecca and Rebecca, because it's going to be quite a different type of story, I think, that you will want to find out more about. So
All right.
in the meantime, need to like and subscribe, of course, that way you won't miss anything. And you can find us on YouTube, you can find us on Spotify, and anywhere else that podcasts are found. We're so thankful that you are here. We're grateful. And of course, if you have comments or things that you would like to know about the books that we review and interview, the authors we interview, please put those in there, and we will try to accommodate those as we go. So
very good. And the easiest place to find all our links is at rebeccaandrebecca.com. Meanwhile, Sarah, once again, thank you so much, and everyone take care, and we'll see you next time.
bye.
Bye.